Middle-earth, a vast region filled with fantasy creatures, wizards, and the overlooked people of the Shire. Tolkien's baby, first named in the Lord of the Rings book back in 1954, has always been a cornerstone in developing the world that has set the standard for fantasy story writing. The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and The Silmarillion were Tolkien's main books, with more being published after his passing, with the help of his sons. Today we're not talking about a work of Tolkien though, but rather something created because of the amazing world built by him. I'm not talking about that trash on Amazon Prime either, but rather the legendary Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games developed by Monolith Productions. The tale follows the epic quest of Talion and Celebrimbor. The two, with one body, challenge Sauron and his enemies in the war with the help of various rebellious groups throughout the games. Today, I don't want to focus on the games as a whole, but rather Talion specifically. Side note, if you do want any information about the games, we have a couple podcasts about them on our channel. Check them out if you're interested. But anyway, Talion is a tragic hero, turned villain, turned hero again, with a selfless sacrifice that finally completes his character. With so much corruption in his world, he remains pure as he remains concentrated on his goals. And not too far from our own world, we also suffer from all the corruption going on in our country, away from our country, everywhere. This is perhaps why I strive to be someone like him, and it turns out that he ended up being one of my favorite protagonists in recent video game media. So about Talion, his early life is much unknown. We don't really know his childhood or anything like that, but we do know he was a former captain of the Rangers of Gondor, and the game starts out with him being a soldier appointed to the Black Gate. The Black Gate being the most fortified point that separates Sauron's realm of Mordor from the city of Gondor. Although it's a step down from being a ranger captain, Talion is with his wife and son. Unfortunately though, things do not stay uneventful at the Black Gate forever. The Black Captains, Sauron's highest ranking warriors, lead a group of Uruk onto the Black Gate, killing everyone except for Talion and his family. They are captured and used in a ritual. Talion has to watch his family killed before him and eventually his own life taken afterwards. The Black Captains use the sacrifice to summon the Bright Lord Celebrimbor, who finds his way to Talion in his wraith form. Celebrimbor prevents Talion from reaching the afterlife and offers him everything he has to fight Sauron for what has happened to his family. Talion, overcome with grief and anger, accepts and begins his assault on the Uruk captains in order to get to the Black Captains and eventually Sauron. Stepping back a little, we can take a look at Talion and how he feels about life on the Black Gate. It's not exactly what he wants or what his wife wants, but he's still happy to be with his family. He's a content and humble man. Early cutscenes show him sparring with his son with smiles and laughs all around. He makes the best of his life and accepts the choices he made. As it turns out, living on the Black Gate forever is nothing compared to the pain Talion suffers at the hands of the Black Captains. Most people don't want to die. They fear what they don't know and what happens to them after everything is gone. Talion isn't like that. He didn't fear death. He did not even fear what he did not know. He only feared what would happen to his family. Unfortunately, the worst possible outcome became real before his eyes. He was banished from death, or in better terms, banished from his family. He was forced to live on remembering how his family was murdered before him, blaming himself for not being strong enough to save them. While no one wants to die and would do most things to continue living, there are worse things than death, and Talion was finding out. He became a tortured soul, wanting to be with his family, but instead being trapped in a life and merged with the unknown wraith Celebrimbor. Talion gains the strength of Celebrimbor and is able to dominate Uruks to force them to fight for him. Talion is against forcing Uruks to fight against their will, but Celebrimbor convinces him that it's necessary to win. This is the beginning of a very curious relationship. While Talion is being blinded by revenge and hatred, Celebrimbor is searching for power. The two meet a new but familiar character of the series, the manipulated and distorted Hobbit Gollum. Talion and Celebrimbor find a relic that Gollum had in a cave, and after touching it, they both see a vision of Celebrimbor losing his family to Sauron. This is the first time in the games where Talion and Celebrimbor actually feel connected to each other. The loss of their family really unites them. Another important character Talion meets is the weak Uruk Ratbag. The cunning Uruk does anything for Talion that will allow him to survive, and it actually ends up pushing him in the rankings. While the relationship is first predicated on necessity, Talion actually does take a favor of him, as they both get what they need. A few more artifacts later, and Celebrimbor regains more and more of himself. Talion and Celebrimbor realize that he crafted the Rings of Power, and eventually find he even crafted the One Ring. While beating himself up for ruining Middle-earth, Talion defends him, saying that Sauron manipulated him. Talion gives him the benefit of the doubt because he understands the power of Sauron, and knows that Celebrimbor wouldn't have done anything that could have ended each of their families. With the help of the now legendary Rat Bag, Talion is able to get the war chiefs to dominate and learn the whereabouts of the Hammer Sauron. He ends up being Talion's first victim as he's easily defeated, but not without loss. Ratbag is struck with his hammer and not seen again. Rest in peace, Ratbag. We will miss you. Unfortunately, Talion doesn't have time to mourn his friend. He is rushed to a new area and meets a dwarf ready to teach him about the new land. Jokes aside, Torvin the dwarf is perhaps Talion's only real friend throughout Shadow of Mordor. He doesn't need Talion to save him or to go on a quest to save Middle-earth with him. Rather, he wants to teach Talion how to hunt and generally must just want to hang out. The final hunt they do is against the legendary Graug. After the two slay the great beast, Torvin reveals that Graug actually slayed his brother and that he'd been tracking it for years. Torvin is finally able to escape, unlike Talion. He is freed from the Graug that represented the loss of his dear brother. Unknowingly, Talion saved Torvin from never getting closure and actually ending up on a path Talion might find himself down later. And it actually felt like him and Talion had a brotherly bond as well, with Torvin and him just having fun at some moments. With their time together, Talion gets the knowledge of how to dominate beasts, both Graugs and Caragors, and with it he combines it with his Uruk army, hoping to rival Sauron's army. Before the final fight, Talion clashes with the Tower and is able to overcome his power after he berates him about being able to be with or save his family. The Tower also reveals that Celebrimbor is lying to Talion. If he wanted to, he could free him for the curse, because as it turns out, he's the one keeping Talion from death. He needs him. He's not with Talion because he wants to help him get revenge. He wants to use him to get what he wants. And it really conflicts with Talion's mind as he has to wonder if he's going to be able to do good with Celebrimbor, or if things will turn out bad. Even with Talion knowing that Celebrimbor is the one that's actively keeping him from his family, he still continues on his attacks and is ready to take on the Black Hand with his new rage. The assault on the Black Gate allows Talion to meet the Black Hand face to face. Unfortunately, it is exactly what the Black Hand wanted, as all of Celebrimbor's past is revealed. He created not only the Rings of Power, but the One Ring. He was able to take it for himself, but in the battle, the ring was drawn to the evilness of Sauron and ended up upon his finger, changing the outcome of the entire war. Celebrimbor was captured by Sauron and killed along with his loved ones. The Black Hand was able to sacrifice itself to draw Celebrimbor into him, creating Sauron in physical form. He attacks Talion but is slain as Celebrimbor is able to stall him during the attack, giving Talion an opening to end him. Celebrimbor tells Talion that the fight isn't for them anymore. However, Talion has changed his mind. It is no longer about revenge, but rather taking the chance to defeat Sauron rather than live in eternity knowing they decided not to try. It's quite the big change as Talion's no longer living for himself or Celebrimbor, but for everyone in Middle-earth. He had a chance right there to turn around and just go into death, to accept the peace of being with his family. But it's not for him. He's been called to save Middle-earth. With the game ending, they both look to Mount Doom, and they decide that they need to craft another ring to challenge Sauron. So, with the end of Shadow of Mordor, we can kind of look back on and see exactly how Talion's character changed throughout the story. In my opinion, the developers played his character pretty safe. They didn't do a whole lot besides the beginning, obviously developing his character by killing his whole family and him. It's kind of a big jump, but nothing else really steps out to me. Maybe having him and Celebrimbor have some pretty tough fights, especially when it comes to what happens with him lying and everything, but they don't really split in this game. I feel like they stay pretty together, but I do think the game does create a strong foundation for Talion and the reasons he fights, especially with the end of the game. It starts at anger and grief, and then he actually wants to help Celebrimbor after seeing he also met a similar fate, and finally ends up with Talion being indifferent with Celebrimbor, but still wanting to stop Sauron for all of Middle-earth. I mean, Talion's literally tortured in this first game to the point where he actually ends up friends with a Uruk. I think when he meets Torvin, he actually regains some of his humanity there. The hunting and conversations with Torvin allows him to think about what he's really doing. Is killing the Black Captains enough? Can he trust Celebrimbor after he lied to Talion about being banished from death? Talion may not have the answers in this game, but he does know what he wants to do, and that's to stop Sauron. He doesn't want more families destroyed. And no one should have to feel the despair that Talion has felt, and he's going to put an end to it rather than think about it for the rest of eternity. So with that said, I think we can hop over to Shadow of War now and really get into when the developers, or the writers for say, really started to cook. Alright, so hopping into Shadow of War, you're immediately greeted with the cutscene of what happened at the end of last game, and then it goes to Talion and Celebrimbor creating the new ring that is to rival Sauron in power. Now this seems like probably a terrible mistake, especially with all we know with the Lord of the Rings lore. But, I mean, it's really the only choice they see they have at this point. They really struggled to beat the Black Captains, so going up against Sauron himself wouldn't be easy. But they don't really have time to think about that afterwards, as soon as they finish crafting the ring, Celebrimbor is mysteriously swept up in a dark shadow. Talion fortunately obtains the ring before then, and is able to live without him with it. So really, with him having the ring keeping him alive, he really has no use for Celebrimbor. But Talion still won't leave his companion behind. It kind of shows already in this game that Talion is actually fond of Celebrimbor even past his lies and what he did with Sauron. And following his calls, Talion is able to locate Celebrimbor, and the calls bring him to a cave of Shelob the Spider. Don't look her up unless you're an incognito. Talion and Shelob talk as he's trying to negotiate to get Celebrimbor back as she's holding him against his will. And she asks him what he's willing to sacrifice, and of course Talion replies he's already given up everything. I mean, we know that from the first game that he has nothing left. She lets him know though that he has one thing left that she wants, and that would be the ring. When she says this, Celebrimbor is immediately against it and would rather that he stay there than have her obtain the ring. But Talion isn't going to listen to him. He cares for Celebrimbor and would rather have him by his side than just this fucking powerful ass piece of metal, I guess. Luckily, as it turns out, Shelob is not the enemy, and actually gives the two directions by using the ring to see into their futures and where they need to go, as she wants Sauron taken down just like most people really. Following Shelob's guidance, they travel to Minas Ithil, a human city that is currently under siege by Sauron and that has a Palantir in their possession. After doing a little bit of fighting with the people of the city, Talion and Celebrimbor kind of quickly realize that the city is not going to last on its own. It's definitely being overpowered through the massive army that Sauron has and just the more powerful people he's able to produce. This causes a drift between Celebrimbor and Talion again, as Celebrimbor just wants to take the Palantir and leave so they're able to protect it, but Talion doesn't want to leave a city just to be destroyed by Sauron. So he ends up convincing Celebrimbor that the city, if it's saved, will also save the Palantir, and Celebrimbor agrees, probably because Talion just saved his ass not 5 minutes before, but you know, he just had to be a little bit of an asshole just so we didn't forget. So Talion, who even though he's dead and has died many times during the story, continues to fight for humanity and tries to help the city the best he can. Unfortunately, it is overpowered and ultimately lost, as Sauron obtains the Palantir with the Nazgul. Using it, he's able to see Shelob has the new ring. Talion and Celebrimbor immediately realize where they need to go. Not wanting the ring to reach Sauron, as that means certain defeat, they immediately charge in with their new friend, Eltariel. Eltariel is introduced as someone who chases down the Nazgul who bear the rings of power. Eltariel is guided by Galadriel's light, so she becomes quite the powerful ally for Talion. Fortunately, I don't find her character written too well, and she really has no impact on Talion's development, so I really won't be talking about too much of story involving her. Talion and Eltariel are able to save Shelob from Sauron's Nazgul before they get the ring. Shelob and Talion share a moment, and she gives up the ring, saying sacrifices must be made, and disappears, probably to attack some hobbits or something like that, I don't know. With the ring, Talion and Celebrimbor are now able to put all their faith back into the ring, even against Eltariel's wishes. With the ring, they are once again going to build another army, and they start by dominating the Olog Bruise the Chopper, who's going to be their basically ratbag, as he's already a captain for Sauron's Uric armies. After building the army up some bit, Talion assaults a Uric castle in order to grow the army and finds the one and only legendary Ratbag. Having slept off the Hammer's attack, Ratbag is back and ready to once again work with Talion, along with his new friend, the Olog Ranger. Talion and Celebrimbor are once again at odds after Talion dominates a Nazgul captain and sees that Celebrimbor followed Sauron in giving the Rings of Power to the kings so that they would be corrupted. Celebrimbor once again claims he was deceived, so Talion questions why he would decide to create a new ring knowing all that happened. It's honestly a really good point, as the first rings, it's understandable, you get manipulated by someone like Sauron who's really good, and then you make the one ring and you take it for yourself and it once again abandons you and goes to Sauron. It's crazy to think that Celebrimbor could still think he could craft such an amazing ring with no flaws in them whatsoever. So not only is Talion mad that Celebrimbor is out there corrupting people into evil beings for Sauron to basically enslave, but he's also just making mistake after mistake doing what he's already done to lose. And the rings are causing Talion to lose everything he loved. If the rings aren't there, then Sauron doesn't go to power. And without the Rings of Power, he would have never had his army of Nazguls to be an elite force for him that searches out any other ring bearers that might go rogue. I think as the player, this is the first time I think I questioned if Celebrimbor was actually a good guy. I think in the past he did things that were messed up, but I thought the ultimate goal was, well, he's doing it to beat Sauron, which will save Middle-earth. But at this point, I kind of started to think, well, what is he searching for? Surely he would find another way to beat Sauron. It doesn't mean bringing a new ring into the world. But really, did he bring the ring into the world just so he could be more powerful? It's really starting to get kind of fuzzy there. After their little fight, Talion is even more torn because he doesn't know if what he's doing is the correct way to beat Sauron. Is it really all just about whatever it takes? As dominating orcs and crafting new rings is just not a way to rule in Talion's mind. Even if they win, they have an army built on mind control, and they've just brought another ring that could put the world into chaos once again. He is even starting to doubt Celebrimbor, and it's not going to get any better now that Celebrimbor has a ring attached to his host. Nevertheless, the two truck on, and they finally construct an army enough to siege Sauron's fortress, coming up against Isildur, the Witch King. Talion's forces end up getting the upper hand in the battle, and he comes face to face with Isildur. Eventually, he is able to overpower Isildur, and using the power of the new ring, removes the hold Sauron has on the Witch King. Celebrimbor then proceeds to dominate the helpless Nazgul, but as Talion sees the former hero who slashed the ring from Sauron's finger, he takes pity on Isildur. Seeing that the ring took control of him after he defeated Sauron, and that Sauron once again resurrected him using the ring, putting him into a life of slavery to him, he stabs his blade through Isildur's chest, followed by the words, "Find peace in death," freeing him from the eternity he was serving as a slave for Sauron and Celebrimbor if Talion allowed it. Celebrimbor becomes extremely upset because he wanted to use Isildur just like Sauron and opts to abandon Talion to die without even saying a goodbye. His story doesn't end here though, as one person still remained at his side. The spider Shelob had not forgotten Talion. She reveals that with the ring that she took from him, she saw the future of Talion defeating Sauron in battle. Unfortunately though, it would have been in vain, with Celebrimbor would replace Sauron as a Bright Lord. Just like the Dark Lord, Celebrimbor would have Middle-earth under his heel, so Shelob stopped it. She asks Talion a simple question again. How much are you willing to sacrifice? Talion then slowly realizes a ring still remains. The corrupt Ring of Power, worn by Isildur before he was freed by Talion, is lying on the ground a few feet away from his arms. Grabbing it, Talion exclaims that he will have control of his fate until his last breath leaves his body. With the ring, Talion is able to live on and obtain some new powers. He decides he needs to head back to Minas Morgul, where the rest of Sauron's forces are at the moment. Using the Palantir that they have obtained, Talion watches Eltariel lose the ring as the Bright Lord attempts to dominate Sauron for control. Without the ring, Celebrimbor and Sauron end up locked together in the Flaming Eye, looming over all of Mordor. Talion fought the darkness inside the ring for decades until finally being consumed and becoming a Nazgul. As a ring wraith, they would hunt the new ring bearers in the Shire. Thankfully, Talion would not die a tragic hero. The hobbits would succeed and create light in the darkness. Sauron and all of his dominion would die with the destruction of the ring, including Talion, who would finally get his peace after sacrificing everything from death to life. Talion made a complete, heroic sacrifice and could finally join his family. With the end of Shadow of War, I was very appeased by what the developers and writers were able to do with this game. I think they were a little more confident in their story writing and maybe had a little bit of a longer leash from Warner Bros. On what they could do with the property. Now, the games are about 5 years apart in the making, so there's also just differences in technology and what they had and could achieve with it. Losing his family at the beginning of Shadow of Mordor was a big thing in how it developed Talion as a character, but in the end, giving him closure through making him choose a Ring of Power really changed to what he became. He isn't this hero that saves the world by defeating Sauron, but he actually has to sacrifice everything to save the world. And yet his ending is still happy. If he kept on living after beating Sauron, then he would never see the family that he just longed for. But he's able to pass and be with them and know everything that he set out to do originally has been done. Evil's been destroyed by the hobbits, and hopefully Middle-earth can return to being a better place. Unfortunately, the ending does cost him his full relationship with Celebrimbor, as instead of just having arguments, they completely separate. Celebrimbor is completely lost into madness from what the ring has done to him, while Talion maintains that humble aspect he had from the very beginning, wanting to protect those who are weaker no matter if he's wearing a ring or has a wraith power. Celebrimbor loses everything, or perhaps he never had it together. With his extensive history, I always kind of thought Celebrimbor never really changed inside because of the ring, but that he's really just corrupt from the start. He lies to Talion about being banished from death, we know for sure. Might not have really lost his memories in the beginning, but actually just exploits Talion when he's blinded by rage and grief. And he always wanted to replace Sauron, so that he could become the new tyrant of Middle-earth. He never cared for Talion, which made it easy to dump him when it suited his goals. He left Talion to die, and yet Talion is still more distressed about Celebrimbor. And this is backed up by the quote of Talion saying, "Celebrimbor's lust for power clouded his vision, and yet I miss him. No war should ever be fought alone." Talion actually got close to Celebrimbor, and unfortunately it did leave him burnt. It's a real show of character to feel sorry for your enemies, especially when they have a direct result on your life and how you're going to impact the world. Unfortunately, a lot of people are like Celebrimbor in this world. I don't know if there's really more Celebrimbors or Talions, but we definitely need more Talions. We need more people willing to give it all, willing to do things they don't want to do, but ultimately make decision to help instead of cause more problems. The final part of Talion's character I really admire is him changing himself to the point worse than death. He would become an enemy to all of his beliefs, everyone he wanted to save, and even his family. If he ignored Shelob's wishes and died, he would have died as a tragic hero. He had always done the right thing, and I couldn't even blame him for giving in to the eternal rest, where he would be in bliss with his family forever, not even caring about Middle-earth. Despite that though, Talion doesn't live for himself like everyone else in the game. A dead man with the most humanity is a crazy angle the developers went with. His character isn't even written to be the real hero of the overall story, as the hobbits are the one to finally lead the ring to its end. Talion would have actually been chasing them through the Shire and all of Middle-earth. Very few people would have recognized his sacrifice, and it's somehow an amazing ending for him. He never did it for fame or glory, because he could. A selfless man always thinking about others, did it for the sake of everyone who couldn't. Rest well, Ranger. That's the end of the video. I appreciate everyone for listening and watching, however you do it, and I hope you all have a good rest of your week, and just face any challenges you have, just head on, believing in yourself, and doing what's right. Check out the podcast if you want to hear more from me, or if you're interested in some other content. My co-host on there, Banana, is probably going to be doing content on this channel here soon, and I've been trying to get him to do some co-op stuff, so hopefully we can get that going. Take care, everyone.